Although Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out over 2 decades ago, it still amazes audiences today. Not only is it a departure from Disney's usual fanfare, it also spearheaded animation into the modern era while simultaneously reinvigorating interest in the golden age of cartoons. However, it does surprise some to hear that their beloved Roger Rabbit is an adaptation derived from the novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit, written by Gary K. Wolfe. Wolfe first got the idea one Saturday morning watching cereal commercials.
They saw cartoon characters talking to real people. Nobody seemed to think it was odd.
Who Censored Roger Rabbit published in 1981 and was picked up by Disney faster than you could say, "Haha, what's up, Doc?"
Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman penned the first 2 drafts of the film, while animation director Daryl Van Sitters took the lead on production. Concept art and test footage hinted at an adaptation that would be faithful to the source material, but in 1985, Disney's CEO Michael Eisner gave the reins to Steven Spielberg and Wolfe's original plot was scrapped. 40 drafts later, we got a completely original plot starring characters who share but a few minor similarities to their book counterparts. So maybe this episode should actually be called What's the Same, because very few things are. But enough jaw-wagging. Let's fish out some bourbon from the desk drawer and get to the bottom of it.
I'm Casey Redmond.
And I'm Clint Gage.
So without further ado, and no restraint on spoilers, what's the difference?
Roger's design in the movie owes much to characters like Mickey Mouse, Droopy the dog, and Bugs Bunny, but certainly not the novel's author, who described Roger as 6 feet tall with white hands, nose, and stomach, but brown fur everywhere else. Book Roger also enjoys a drink now and then, mostly an animated liquor called Toon, which his movie counterpart probably wouldn't be able to handle. Eddie Valiant is much more fit in the novel as opposed to the film's stocky gumshoe portrayed by the late Bob Hoskins, whose character is haunted by the memory of his brother's death at the hands of a Toon. In fact, this tragic backstory does not appear in the book at all. Book Valiant doesn't need a dead brother to drink heavy amounts of brown liquor.
Jessica Rabbit is a hot-headed model and gold-digging tart with a body straight out of one of those magazines adolescent boys pore over in locked bathrooms. In fact, she breaks into the comic business by starring in a Tijuana Bible called Lewd, Crude, and In the Mood. Yowza. The film touches on these elements with her overall sensual demeanor, but specifically during her nightclub tune about taking money from a sugar daddy. Instead of the loving and dedicated wife to Roger Rabbit, she divorces him for her ex and Roger's boss, Rocco DeGreasy. She almost always speaks ill of Roger, which is something that movie Jessica would never do.
I'd do anything for my husband, Mr. Valiant. Anything.
Now, because the film's plot is completely independent from the source material, there are many characters that simply don't exist in the novel. Judge Doom, the Weasels, Marvin Acme, and Benny the Cab, just to name a few. The novel's cast mainly consists of Eddie Valiant, Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit, comic strip executives Rocco and Dom DeGreasy, and Carol Masters, Roger's photographer. What's a cartoon rabbit need with a photographer?
Well, in the book, Toons work in print, posing for comic strips that a photographer shoots and develops. The way that Toons communicate in the world is also based on comic strips, as the characters produce speech balloons along with their spoken words. These balloons would often fall to the floor, leaving a giant mess all over the place. Now, obviously, Disney animators had plenty to do as it was, so a cacophony of speech balloons lying around went straight to the trash bin. The book also gives Toons the ability to create a double of themselves known as doppels, a separate entity that looks the same but is ultimately an empty shell with very little memory or personality. Doppels are mainly used during scenes too dangerous for the Toon actor.
Oh, like a stunt double.
That's exactly right, Gumshoe Man. You see, unlike the film where Toons are crushed, burned, and flattened without consequence, the book's Toons are just as fragile as humans.
If you cut me, do I not bleed?
Of course you do. See?
However, these doppels only exist for a few hours before they end up disintegrating into dust.
The film starts off with a Baby Herman cartoon starring Roger Rabbit as the hapless second banana. After Roger mucks up the take, the camera introduces Eddie Valiant, who accepts a wandering wife job from studio bigwig R.K. Maroon. But in the book, it's Roger who hires Valiant, and not to take juicy pictures of his wife. Instead, Roger wants to know why his boss, Rocco DeGreasy, refuses to give him his own comic strip, or at least to sell his contract to another studio. Yeah, I know it sounds a little dry, but stay with us. The movie has Valiant snoop around the ink and paint club, which only serves human customers, drawing obvious parallels to segregation in the US. But Wolfe's novel delves further into the racism theme, with Toons being responsible for building the Great American Railroads, humans leaving neighborhoods filling with Toon tenants just like white flight, and loads of hurtful Toon slander. Many Toons do their best to seem more human. Jessica Rabbit even suppresses her speech balloons. In the movie, Valiant plows through the plot with a lot of sneaking around, fistfights, car chases, and shootouts. But in the book, Valiant conducts himself in a more classic noir fashion, conducting interview after interview, starting with Baby Herman. The 50-year-old with the 3-year-old Dinky remains unchanged, though in the book he has a human manservant as opposed to the film's hot nanny.
Hello, nice.
Nearly every plot point is revealed through these interviews and the occasional room search. Stories get contradicted between suspects and motives are unclear, creating a trust no one situation. In the film, things get brutal when Marvin Acme is found dead, crushed by an anvil. Sergeant Santino considers the case shut with Roger as the killer. But the movie isn't the only one with a stiff on its hands. No. Book Valiant stops by the rabbit's house only to find Roger's corpse slumped over the banister, soaking in a pool of his own blood.
Wait a minute there, I think you're mistaken. Roger can't die.
Oh, he can, and he does. Gunshot wounds and all. Then, while Valiant gets grilled by Toon Police Captain Cleaver, a human investigator named Hudson arrives from the murder scene of none other than Roger's boss, Rocco DeGreasy.
Rocco got plugged too. When it rains, it pours, huh?
And who would you guess is the main suspect?
Roger Rabbit.
Bingo.
I only guessed that because it was obvious. The film brings Eddie back to his office for some much-needed rest, except there's a suspected killer in his bed. Roger begs Eddie to take his case and clear his name, but Valiant drips with reluctance and only caves when the weasels show up.
Weasels aside, this scene is surprisingly similar to the book, wherein Valiant returns home only to find Roger waiting for him.
But wait, you said Roger was dead.
He is.
Now listen here, mister, are you taking me for a ride?
No. The Roger we see here is a doppel, whom the original Roger created hours before his death using an incredible amount of mental energy, making him a perfect copy. This doppel has all of Roger's personality and memory, as well as a longer lifespan of 48 hours. The doppel had been sent off to run a late-night errand by the original, but when the copy returned home to a crime scene, he fled straight to Valiant's office. So now these two team up to solve both murders before the doppel fades away.
The film then puts Acme's will at the center of its plot.
And unless Mr. Acme's will shows up by midnight tonight, Cloverleaf is going to own Toontown.
But in the book, the object of desire is a plain old tea kettle that vanished from Roger's kitchen the night of the murder. Both Dom DeGreasy and Jessica offer tremendous rewards for possession of the seemingly ordinary tea kettle. In fact, it's during Jessica's offer that she utters those famous words, "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way," and further entices Valiant with a deep kiss that tastes of rose petals and honey. Rose petals and honey. Should we get back to the movie now? Right, yes, of course. Judge Doom finds our protagonist in the hooch parlor and almost gives Roger the dip. Instead, they give Doom the slip in a Toon cab named Benny, whose character is derived from a junkyard beetle from the book.
Throughout the novel, Eddie uncovers a fraudulent art scheme which ends up being a red herring, much like the blackmail plot that leads Valiant to RK Maroon.
Luckily, Maroon is gunned down, giving Valiant an assailant to chase to the next plot point. Valiant embraces his past self as he loads a Toon gun, but more interestingly, he pours out his hooch. Book Valiant would never give up the drink so easily. You'd be hard-pressed to find many noir detectives who would. God knows I couldn't do it. Whiskey is the only drink loneliness will share with me. One can only speculate that Disney wanted to have an anti-alcohol message by the end of it. You know, for the kids.
The book nears its end with the revelation that Roger's missing tea kettle is in fact an ancient magic lantern. According to legend, a Toon genie resides inside, obliged to grant 3 wishes to any Toon who utters the magic phrase. Meanwhile, Doppel Roger gets picked up by Captain Hudson with only hours left in his life.
Roger is captured in the film as well, along with Eddie and Jessica. It's here where Judge Doom reveals his sinister development plot.
A construction plan of epic proportions. They're calling it a freeway.
It's clear the writers were inspired by Roman Polanski's Chinatown, hence scrapping the tea kettle mystery for an insidious land deal.
It'll be beautiful.
In the book, Eddie returns the magic lantern to Dom DeGreasy, who calls forth the genie. Dom drops dead, leaving Eddie in a standoff with a homicidal Toon. As if this isn't loony enough, it also turns out that the DeGreasy brothers were born Toons.
What?
This transformation from Toon to human is called crossing over, which is somewhat borrowed in the film adaptation when a flattened Doom peels himself off the asphalt and haunts children's dreams long into adulthood.
Movie Valiant's fight to the death involves all sorts of action: spring shoes, magnets, anvil fists, singing sword, handsaw, and a portable Hulk, but Doom ultimately meets his demise by a crack shot with a glove hammer.
The novel kicks off its brawl with some good old-fashioned conversation, in which the genie confesses to murdering Roger, who inadvertently summoned him by singing the last words of When You Wish Upon a Star. Eventually, Valiant can't stall any longer, and a fistfight ensues. Because according to legend, the only way to defeat this genie was to best him in hand-to-hand combat and drop his lantern into the ocean. Eddie notices a saltwater fish tank nearby, so he holds the genie hostage above the water and wishes to exchange the Toon's life for absolute proof that Rocco was murdered by his own brother Dom DeGreasy, not Roger. A suicide note and confession to both Rocco's and Roger's murders, written and signed by Dom DeGreasy, magically appears in Valiant's pocket. With that, he drops the genie into the fish tank, where the Toon melts into a billow of smoke.
The genie's death is mirrored in the film as Judge Doom pulls a similar smoky meltdown. All is well now that Doom is literally out of the picture. With Toontown spared from the dip machine, Roger's name cleared, and Eddie's returned sense of humor. Wait, Acme's will! Boom! Legal document hidden with disappearing, reappearing ink. The book, however, ends on a darker, more solemn tone. After Valiant picks up a disintegrating Roger from the station, only one question remains: who really murdered Rocco DeGreasy? Eddie lights a smoke and deduces the murderer was none other than the original Roger Rabbit. The doppel was created to secure an alibi, while the real Roger committed the murder, which he would then pin on Valiant by planting the murder weapon in Eddie's apartment. Then Roger's doppel drops a bombshell.
I had it planned for days. Roger called afterwards and told me he'd done it. I gave him the name of the store I'd visited, so he had his alibi. The only thing left was to pick up the gun and plant it in your apartment.
Roger had played dumb while Eddie played the sap. But for clearing Roger's name regardless of what he had planned to do, Roger's doppel calls him a stand-up guy. And with one wink, he collapses into dust and floats out the window. Now, while this ending is dim, there is none more fitting for a traditional noir tale.
That's the biggest difference between the two mediums. While Disney borrowed themes and elements from the seedy noir genre, they ultimately made a family film. Don't get us wrong, we love this movie, and so does Gary K. Wolfe for that matter. In Wolfe's two pseudo-sequels, the characters and places reflect those of the film. He rewrites the story's continuity by revealing the original book as a bad dream Jessica Rabbit wakes up from in Who Plugged Roger Rabbit.
Anyway, that's all for now. I bet you either want to pop in the movie or get around to finally reading the novel or draw on a smoking hot dame for us all to ogle in our off time. Like this video if you want to see more of What's the Difference. Make sure to subscribe to CineFix for more awesome movie content, and let us know in the comments what you thought about all the changes. That's all, folks. That was a terrible Porky.